It's January 8th, Wednesday. There's a snowstorm outside, and the Montreal Canadiens had their mid-season press conference earlier in the day. Kent Hughes talking to the media about the state of the organization to this point of the season. Did he tell us anything? Wait and find out. Welcome to Montreal Hockey Talk, everybody. I'm Costa Papulias. And, the Montreal Canadiens decided to have their press conference today, and it was great. What happened? Kent Hughes got up. He sat in front of a microphone, and what did he do? The questions started coming in, and he told you absolutely nothing. It's as simple as that. And it's the same thing every year. The Montreal Canadiens have a press conference, blah, blah, blah. Get a couple of quotes. Everybody's happy. We move on. Speaking of quotes, let's take a look at one right now where Kent Hughes says they haven't accomplished anything yet. And that's very true. The Montreal Canadiens haven't accomplished anything. They've done very well in the last 10 games, 8 out of 10 won. You can't say anything about it, but they're not anywhere near where they want to be as far as their compete level. Speaking of which, they don't want to be overconfident, he says, like Buffalo or Detroit. And in that sense, he's saying that because those two teams both tried to make the playoffs last year and flubbed, especially Buffalo, who looks absolutely putrid this year. But in Detroit's case, they kind of recovered very quickly. They are very competitive this year, and they're expected to continue to grow that franchise. Steve Yzerman is trying to do what his mentor, Ken Holland, did, and that is restock the coffer so that he's able to have an abundance of young players at the American Hockey League level that he can groom over a 4 to 6 year period. And when they come to the National Hockey League, they will be veterans and ready to play the game. Detroit showed a lot of success in the late 90s and early 2000s with that formula, and that's where Stevie Y wants to go. So good on him. Ken Hughes continued to say the plan is to get to the team, to build it so that it'll compete for a championship every year. And that is exactly what we want as fans, what we used to have in the 70s and 80s. And I know the generation now really hasn't lived it. They've heard the history. They've heard the stories. 5 cups in the 50s, 4 cups in the 70s, beating the big bad Bruins, beating the Broad Street Bullies, the Philadelphia Flyers. I mean, everybody's heard it, but you haven't lived it. Some of us have seen a cup. I saw my share of cups. For sure. I'm an old man, for crying out loud. I saw the Cups in the 70s between my age of being 48 years old. Went to the Stanley Cup parade in 86 where Jean Perrault stole my pennant. I got him back for that in the future, by the way. And I was there in 1993 when the Habs won their last Stanley Cup against the LA Kings. So, I've gotten a chance to live through it. I want my kids to see it because in 2021, we lived through the whole Stanley Cup final experience, and it was a blast. But it's inconsistent. They got there, and then after that, the team just imploded. That's not what we want as fans. We want to have a team that's competitive, entertaining, and fun to watch. And if they get to the Stanley Cup final or they get close, as long as they're competitive and they're fun to watch, I think as a fan base, we're all going to be happy, I should say. And finally, the last thing that we want to talk about as far as the quotes today is concerned is, Ken, you said we want it to be in the mix in terms of getting to the point we want to get there. Players need to experience things. We want players to be under pressure to win the games. They need to win. Whether they succeed or not, the process is the important part. And that's the key. Between that and the identity of the hockey club, that is the most important part. I know the quote didn't make very much sense, but it's verbatim. But at the end of the day, when you look at what they've done here, and take as an example from that quote, take Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki. Both those guys played in the 2021 Stanley Cup final. They got that experience early on in their careers, and they both contributed, which was very important. Sure, it's disappointing, but for them, it was more about the process of getting there because it was different. It was during COVID, and the work it took to get there in the teams that they played against. Keep in mind, they played against Vegas, who they beat. Nobody expected the Canadiens to come out of the play-in round. They did that. Toronto didn't. But that's pretty much it. Now what we want is the team to be competitive year in, year out. We want the players to get the experience of being let down and the experience of winning. That's what it takes to build a competitive franchise. So, baby steps. It's not like he tore the world apart in what he said. There are other things he said too that we're going to mention a couple of them here later. But at the end of the day, those 4 quotes are the most important part of the press conference. He said, it's status quo. He said, that is what, we're not going to jump the gun. We're not going to break the plan. Everything is still going according to plan. The long-term vision is still in place. Nothing's changed. So don't expect a blockbuster trade at the trade deadline. Don't expect anything crazy at the draft unless it benefits the team long-term. Then we'll address it. But right now, it's status quo. The team is near a wild card spot. Everything's great. Everything's roses. Moving on. Can somebody please tell me why they think something's wrong with Jutaj Slafkovsky? He's in his second and a half season. It's not even 3 seasons because if you remember in his first season, he got hurt and didn't finish it off. But he's in his 3rd year. Sure, last year he got 20 goals and everything was great and everybody was happy. But this was at the end of the season. The Canadiens were surging a little bit. He was getting a lot of ice time, and it was when Caulfield, Suzuki, and Slafkovsky really started to shine together. We were expecting that coming out of the gate at the beginning of the year. It didn't really happen. Things got changed around a little bit. Now they're back together again. But the thing about Slav, if you look at their stats as an example, Cole Caulfield, right, he has 38 points in 40 games. He's played all 40 this year. He's got 117 shots on goal so far. That's a hell of a number for the guy on the first line. It's great, right? 117 shots. I'm not quite sure if he's leading the team or not, but he must be extremely close. Then you've got Nick Suzuki, who's also played all 40 games. He's got 41 points, point per game player, by the way, and 78 shots on goal. So, the number comes down a little bit. Between the two of them, though, they've got 195 shots on goal, which is, quite the accomplishment. And then, what do you have? Jutaj Slafkovsky, who's got 37 games under his belt and a whole 46 shots on goal. And why is that, you ask yourself? Because he's not pulling the trigger? Well, think about it for a minute. He's the guy that's up along the boards. He's the guy that's fighting for the puck. Dishes to Wayne Hudson, dishes to Matheson, dishes to Suzuki, dishes to Caulfield. How many times do you see him get the puck back? Why? Because he's still along those boards. He's not getting inside the dots and getting into a position where he can shoot the puck. That's kind of what Marty St. Louis is trying to get him to do. Move off the boards, get the puck to one of your teammates, and get towards the front of the net. I've said this before. I don't know if I said it this year or if I mentioned it on that hockey show with my friend Paul Cuthbert, but Jutaj Slafkovsky reminds me of Tim Kerr in the sense that he's a big guy, not very fleet of foot. He can skate, but he's not uber quick. But he's shifty. He's able to get in and out of the crease. He can get to the high slot. He can make himself an option, and he's got a pretty quick release. Well, if you can do that as a big man, Tim Kerr was a perennial 50-goal scorer when he was with the Philadelphia Flyers. Not too shabby as an expectation for Jutaj Slafkovsky, right? So get off the boards, get in between the dots. I'm not even telling you to get in front of the net. Just get in between the dots, get a couple more shots on goal, be aggressive, see what happens. Nobody's going to fault you for putting in effort. Nobody's going to fault you for pushing the envelope a little bit. If you get too far away from the game plan, then yeah, somebody's going to tell you something, but try. What do you have to lose? The biggest thing that I see in Slafkovsky's game is that his timing is off. Last year, when he was getting all those goals, his timing was right on, and he was able to get shots off before the defenders got a stick on him or were able to get in front. That's not happening this year. He's waiting a little bit too long. So again, that timing's off. Right? It's like AHL to NHL timing, that type of thing, where it's a split second too slow. Get that timing back, you're going to see better things from Slafkovsky. But don't change your game, man. You're doing well. Just get in between the dots more. You're going to be fine. And in talking about a European forward, the last thing I want to bring up today is Ivan Demidov. Now, I've stayed away from talking about Demidov the entire season because everything coming out about the lack of ice time and stuff like that, I've been a coach of a player who thought he was bigger than the team at one point. And sometimes when a player gets drafted as high as Demidov did, his ego gets inflated a little bit. Not very much, because the kid does seem to have a very nice character. So I don't want to besmirch him too much. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you keep that kid focused on what needs to be done. And so if Roman Rottenberg, by the way, that's a hell of a Bond villain name. Keep that in mind for the next Bond film. Roman Rottenberg, he's got that, I don't want this kid to get his head to get too big. I want him to focus on getting better, on getting quality shifts, and we'll see what he can do later on. It had nothing to do with the trip to Russia. You heard Ken Hughes say there were other teams there. He had never seen him play live before, so they decided to go, watch him play, and get a chance to talk to him and the organization to try to see what's what, right? They sat down with Roman Rottenberg. Chances are he probably told them, listen, the reason why I sat him was because he was talking too much. He was being, undisciplined as far as his stuff with the coach. We don't know. That's never going to come out, right? But there's a reason why coaches bench players. It's not necessarily because they're not producing. It's not necessarily because they think they can't produce. Sometimes it's just a disciplinary action. So leave it alone. He's a young kid. It is what it is. You look at his stats. He's got 31 points in 40 games. So it's not performance. We know that he can put up points. And so those days now, I think, of him playing 10, 12 minutes a game, those are going to be gone, because the fans now see what this kid can do, and they're going to want him to be in the lineup more often. Whether or not Rottenberg decides he's rotten at the core, totally different story. But at the end of the day, Demidov is going to dictate what happens to him. If he's a good soldier and he's good with his coach and things go well, then, it's going to be just that. It's going to be great. But if they do not go well and Demidov does, for lack of a better term, screw the pooch, what are we supposed to do? As long as he produces, though, he's going to be fine. He's going to be able to get more points. He's going to continue to produce. He's going to look great in front of his team. He's going to look great in front of his fans. And despite the fact that he can't come to the NHL because his contract finishes in May of 2025 with St. Petersburg, he's going to be a hell of an ad next year, because we expect him to come to the National Hockey League and be at camp for the beginning of next season. So all kinds of exciting things going on right now for the Montreal Canadiens. Can't wait. And it's been a long time since I've said this. I can't wait for the next game, because they've been playing so well. Bye for now.